House of Israel International Services are held weekly at 3601 Rose Lake Drive, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28217, 11 a.m. Saturday mornings and 7 p.m. Thursday evenings, Eastern Time. This live broadcast is made possible through financial contributions from brothers and sisters like you. Your financial support is greatly appreciated. Thank you. Motivating. Inspiring. Challenging. Encouraging. Deepening. Strengthening. And enhancing your faith. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to House of Israel International's live worship service.
Hallelujah. Well, there is a great deal of excitement in this room this morning. I can feel the enthusiasm. I'm so glad to see all of you this morning. Hallelujah. As I've started all of these teachings off with the fact that there is a distinction that I see between people who tithe and people who don't. And this is very clear. Whenever you will find people who have problems financially, especially those who claim to be believers, one of the questions, and if it's you who are having financial difficulties, you need to ask yourself, am I honoring the Father in the area of finances? That's an important statement. And here's something that I realize, and I'm going to deviate real quickly. In the book of Proverbs, there's a verse of scripture, a passage actually, that helped me to see something concerning the finances that I'd not seen before. And I think this will bless you as well. In Proverbs chapter 3, while I was learning or doing the teaching on the first fruits, I came across this passage, and it's a passage that is a few verses down, one of those memory verses. How many of you remember in the churches you've been in where they called you to memorize scripture, and one of the scriptures is, that you are to trust in God with all of your heart, with all of your soul and strength, and lean not to your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will direct your path. And that was probably the sum total of the Proverbs chapter 3. Well, if you read down just a few verses from verse number 6, it says, "Be not wise in your own eyes, fear Jehovah and depart from evil. It shall be health to your navel and marrow to your bones. Fear Jehovah and depart from evil." And the question becomes, what is evil? What is evil? Evil is anything that is contrary to Jehovah's way, Jehovah's law. We know that the only difference between those who love the Father and those who hate the Father are those who keep his commandments. You see, it's not about hating him as far as shaking my fist at him, but he says that if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. And for those who keep his commandments, he shows mercy to 1,000 generations, and he used this term, to them that love me and keep my commandments. But those who don't keep the commandments of YeHoVaH, he says that, that they will not experience that love. They will actually deal with the iniquity of the fathers to the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. Here in Proverbs chapter 3, it says in verse number 9, honor YeHoVaH with your substance. Now, when I began to look at this and begin to do some study around it, what the Proverbs writer is saying is that, well, let's continue. It says, honor YeHoVaH with your substance and with the first fruits of all your increase. So shall your barns be filled with plenty, and your presses shall burst out with new wine. As a former Christian, what was drilled down my throat is the idea that you needed to make sure that you tithe. You need to tithe. If you don't tithe, you're cursed with a curse. You're robbing God. And so the focus and the emphasis was on tithing. And the reason why the focus and emphasis was on tithing in the Christian church is because the Christian church didn't understand first fruits. They didn't understand the offerings. And we're going to see today that there are several of them. But they focused on the part of the Bible that they took, and that was the tithe. And Malachi says, you've robbed me in tithe and offerings, but yet the tithe was the focus. When you have a people who reject the Torah and they take what they want, they don't even realize that they are leaving the best part, the offerings that are there. But even more important than that, this is what the Father showed me in this verse. He says, listen, you, Arthur, talking to me, you're so focused on the tithe that you're not focused on the 90. In other words, once you give a tithe, you've gotten God's money out of your possession. The rest of it is yours to spend the way you choose to spend it. And the Proverbs is saying, are you honoring him with all your substance? What is he saying? Are you honoring him in your house? Are you honoring him in your car? Are you honoring him in your bedroom? Are you honoring him in your kitchen, in your living room? Are you honoring him with the things that you're buying, the things that you're spending the money that he allows you to keep? Are you honoring him? Are you using the resources that he allows you to hold on to in a manner that brings honor and glory to him? It changed my life. Because now who I do business with was just as important as the business that I was doing. Where I spent my money, the money that he allowed me to hold on to, was as important as the money that I'm spending. Because now I realize that if I am really his and everything that I have truly belongs to him, then he's just as concerned about how I'm spending his resources that he allowed me to hold on to as a steward. Does this make sense to you? So now what I'm looking at is that the 10th, that's his. I have no say over that. But over this, he's saying, okay, what are you going to do with this? Because these would be like the talents he allowed me to hold on to. What are you doing with those talents? And that's the essence of this teaching, maximizing the talents. It's not about spiritual gifts. It's not about abilities and skills. It's about money. What are you doing with the money that I've entrusted you with while I'm going away to a foreign place? Know this, I'm coming back and I'm going to hold you accountable for the 90. Now, you've been faithful in getting the 10th out of your possession, but are you faithful with that which you are holding on to, or have you made the mistake, like so many make the mistake, claiming that I am his property, but that which is in my possession belongs to me, and I can spend it any way I want to? There's a great deception among the people of YeHoVaH that has to be clarified. When that realization came upon me, now I had to start thinking like the priest that I'm supposed to be. I have to think about how I conduct my household. I have to think about how I'm raising the children that he's entrusted me with for 17 or for 18 years. I had to think about how I am using these resources. Am I squandering it? Am I wasting them, or am I investing them in a way to where when he comes back, I'm not broke, I'm not lame, I'm not poor, talking about, Master, I'm so glad to see you. I'm glad because I got tired of being down here. No, we're supposed to occupy. We're supposed to take possession. We're supposed to take that which he has given us and multiply it. See, we get the idea of being fruitful and multiply only when it comes to children. But he wants to enlarge your territory. He wants you to be a good steward, because if you're a good steward over the resources that he's placed in your hand, guess what? You've been given a little, he's going to give you more, and he's going to give you more, and he's going to give you more, because if you're faithful over the little, he will make you ruler over much. But many people aren't faithful, and so they never get to rule. We're supposed to be taking that 2 and turning it into 4. Taking that 5 and turning it into 10. Whatever the talent he's given us, we're supposed to be taking it and making more of it. You can't turn 2 spiritual gifts into 4. Can't turn 3 abilities into 6. It's talking about money. But you start mentioning money among some people. The only people who don't get scared when you start mentioning money is people who got a lot of money. They're not nervous, because they're saying, it's about time you got to that, Reverend. You know, there's people who got funds that can't let you know they have funds because you've mismanaged your funds. And the moment you know they've got funds, now you're knocking on their door for their funds. So they have to hide their funds from those who mismanage their own funds. Oh man, I'm listening. Before this message is out, this whole house may be cleared out. Except for those who really want to walk in the blessings and the prosperity of the Almighty. There is a difference. And so you see here, honor YeHoVaH with your substance and with the first fruits of all your increase. So shall your barns be filled with plenty, and your presses shall burst out with new wine. He's saying that if you maximize the talents, honor the Father with that which belongs to him, but also with the substance that he allow you to hold on to, you're going to see an increase in every area of your life. This is what the Proverbs writer is saying. Your barns are going to overflow. Your vats are going to overflow. You're going to have plenty. But you got to learn to manage that which he has placed in your possession. An old prophet used to say, a fool and his money will soon part. Now, he wasn't a prophet in the Bible, but, you know, he's a worldly prophet. You don't manage the resources that you have, there's always someone waiting to take them off your hands. But Father wants to give you wisdom in honoring the resources that he's placed in your hand, because the day is going to come when you're going to have to give an account for everything that he has placed in your care. Everything. People who tithe seem to be healthier, wealthier, and wiser. They seem to be happier and enjoy life more. People who don't tithe seem to be lacking, sickly, miserable, confused, worriers, never having enough, struggling to make ends meet, and trying to figure out how to get that which you have. In biblical theology last week, we talked about the first mentioned principle, is that principle by which the interpretation of any verse is aided by considering the first time a subject is mentioned in the scripture. And we looked at this particular principle as it related to the tithe. We found that the first mention is a key which unlocks the door into the full truth, a gateway into the path of truth, a guide to discovering the truth in its progressive unfolding, the first link in a long chain of revelation, a seed which has within it the full truth that is to be developed in all subsequent mentions. And then we looked at where the idea arose of paying the tenth, and we could not find it. There's no particular origin in the Bible as to where the tithe came from. But we do know that the first time the word is mentioned has to do with the distribution of goods, as Abraham, who had beat these kings, gotten Lot back and his possessions, began to distribute the goods that YeHoVaH had placed in his possession through the spoils. when he defeated those kings who had defeated kings, and we note that there was 15, 16 kings, the spoils of all of those kings now lay at the feet of Abraham, and a person who shows up in the book of Genesis, Abraham, for some strange reason, decides to give him a tithe, and the Bible says he gave him a tithe of all. He didn't just give him a tenth, he gave him a tenth of everything. He gave him a tenth of the horses, if there were horses, a tenth of the camels, a tenth of the armor, a tenth of the gold, a tenth of the silver, possibly even a tenth of the people. We know that the king of Sodom came and says, you can keep all this stuff, just give me the people back. And Abraham said to him, you're not going to ever be able to say that you made Abraham rich. We notice that in the chapter before, Abraham was already made rich when he went to Egypt. Now, some argue that Abraham gave him a tenth of the spoil, but the Bible says that Abraham gave him a tithe of all, which means that everything that was there, he gave him 10% of. The next time we see the word is associated with Abraham's grandson, Jacob. And we noted that he promised that he would give a tithe of everything if YeHoVaH brought him in to the place that he was going and brought him back into the land safely. And so he says, of all that you give me, I will surely give the tenth of all. And so by the time we get to the New Testament or to the written commandments, the whole idea of tithing had already been established. Now we know that there's no biblical passage that shows us that Jacob gave a tenth of anything. We don't find Jacob giving a tithe. However, when we get to the book of Hebrews, we're going to see that Levi gave a tithe through Abraham. We see that Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, now is the overseer or the father of the 12 tribes, and it is through the 12 tribes that they begin to give tithe. But we also find that the idea of tithing of everything had already been established, and by the time we get to the written instruction, because we don't know. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know, and can you picture the kings are going out to war, and they're bringing goats and sheep. Can you picture that? I mean, who's going to be herding these goats and sheep while they go out to war? There's a possibility that there were no goats and sheep when Abraham went to defeat the kings who had defeated the other kings. And so the tithe that he gave was of the stuff that was left, the spoils. Are you hearing me? So now Father begins to give instructions concerning specific tithe of the land, and then specific tithe of the animals, and what animals could be tithed from and what animals couldn't be tithed from. And last week we got into the discussion of the census, which introduced money, silver, and in the Q&A it got off into redemption, and the census got a little confused or mixed up with the redemption, which created some dialogue that we're going to clear up today. Jacob's name was changed to Israel, and we know that Jacob had 4 firstborn sons. Now Jacob had his oldest son, which was Reuben, but Jacob had 4 wives. In some places they're wives, in some places they're concubines. But the fact of the matter is that the concubines' sons, as well as the sons of the wives, were all considered to be full-fledged Israelites. Now, I need to let you know today that many of you already know this. Levi was not Jewish. Levi was a Levite. Judah was Jewish. The tribes of Judah is where the descendants of the Jews come from. Levi was not. He was of the tribe of Levi. And we're going to find, ladies and gentlemen, that this issue with Melchizedek is not dealt with yet. We're going to look at it. But I wanted to point this out because we're going to get into the firstborn and the redeeming of the firstborn, which means that every firstborn male that breaks the matrix is holy to YeHoVaH. Jacob has 4. But that's not the focus here today. By the time Moses received the written instruction, the idea and definition of tithing had already been established. Tithe had already been established back with Abraham, reestablished with Jacob. What's the tithe? It's a tenth. What do you tithe from? What did Abraham tithe from? Everything. What did Jacob promise a tithe from? All. The first mention of tithe in the written instruction has to do with the land tithe. Now, when we talk about the written instruction, what I'm talking about and referring to is when Moses went up into Sinai and got the written instruction. We've already identified that the Torah begins at Genesis 1:1. Don't make the mistake of thinking that Moses went up into the mountain and got the Torah. Moses went up in the mountain and the Father gave him the written instructions, including the instructions concerning creation, the instructions concerning the flood, the covenants that were made before Moses, and the covenant that was made with the children of Israel at Sinai. So the Torah begins in Genesis 1:1, not Leviticus 20 or Exodus chapter 20, where YeHoVaH calls the children of Israel at the base of the mountain and began to command the 10 words. He only got to 10 because the people didn't want to hear anymore. He wasn't done. But there are those who call themselves Seventh-day Adventists who will argue with you that the only commands that is important is the 10, because those are the ones that Moses wrote. Moses wrote a whole lot more than 10, and Moses didn't make this stuff up in the mountain somewhere after he'd ate pizza or something. They didn't have pizza back then. He didn't eat some bad meat. Moses received the instructions from the Almighty, and he gave those instructions to the children of Israel, beginning with Genesis 1:1. The tithe belongs to YeHoVaH. That's the most important thing in this message. Because people in their religion compartmentalizing with theological doctrines have decided that they know now the mind of God based on the Strong's Concordance. Therefore, what they're saying, well, here's the first time it's mentioned, and here's what it means. Remember that when we begin to deal with certain principles of the Bible, first mention don't necessarily mean when the first time something is mentioned, but when it is actually demonstrated. And this is how we got back into Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel brought an offering, and we have no idea, no clue as to where the concept came from. We never see his parents offer anything. The first sacrifice, it appears, is when YeHoVaH killed an animal and made them clothes. But yet, we don't see Adam, Mr. or Mrs. Adam, instructing their children to bring anything to the Almighty, but yet Abel brings the first fruit. The fat, the firstlings is what that is. The firstlings is the first one that breaks the matrix. Abel brought the first animal, the first male animal from every animal that was clean, and offered that first male animal that broke the matrix and the fat thereof to YeHoVaH, and YeHoVaH was very pleased. And we identified in the book of Hebrews that Abel is now mentioned in the hall of faith, and all Abel ever did was bring an offering. It's the only thing he did. And yet YeHoVaH declared him as righteous. As a matter of fact, we looked in the book of Hebrews, and the Bible says YeHoVaH testified concerning Abel that he was righteous. How many people in the Bible can you find YeHoVaH testifying about? But he testified concerning Abel, and all Abel ever did that we know of, biblically recorded, is offer an offering. He brought the firstlings. The next thing you know, there's a conversation with Cain. Next thing you know, Abel is dead. And yet YeHoVaH is testifying about him in the book of Hebrews, that he was righteous based on his offering. The tithe belongs to YeHoVaH. Leviticus 27:30, and all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the tree, who's it belong to? It is YeHoVaH's. It is holy unto YeHoVaH, not holy unto the Levites. And we're going to see this here in a minute. See? And if a man will at all redeem all of his tithes, he shall add thereto the fifth part. Now we see that YeHoVaH gives further instructions, said, listen, the tithe belongs to me. Now, if you're going to use the tithe and not bring the tithe at the appointed time of the tithe, then that's fine. You just add a fifth part to it. Next is the tithe of the flocks and the herds, Leviticus 27:32. And concerning the tithe of the herd, and notice he uses concerning the tithe of the land, concerning the tithe of the herd. Even of whatsoever passeth under the rod, the tenth shall be holy unto YeHoVaH. Who's it holy unto? Not the Levites, not even the priests. Holy unto YeHoVaH. Does YeHoVaH eat any of it? No. Who gets to eat it? The Levites. He shall not search whether it is good or bad, neither shall he change it. If he change it at all, then both it and the change thereof shall be holy, it shall not be redeemed. YeHoVaH replaced the firstborn with the Levites. YeHoVaH said to Moses, bring the tribe of Levi and present them to Aaron the priest to assist him. They are to perform duties for him and for the whole community at the tent of meeting by doing the work. By doing the work. By doing the work. They worked on Shabbat. The Levites weren't holy. They were separated unto YeHoVaH. He said, because if you remember, Jacob pronounced that these guys, the Levites and Simeon, Levi and Simeon, their counsel was cursed. Remember what they did when they took those individuals in Shechem, and they, because of their sister, who one had raped the king's son, had taken his sister and had dealt with her in such a way, and Levi got upset and Simeon got upset, and they invoked the name of YeHoVaH by telling these individuals that if you want to marry our sister and become part of us, you need to get circumcised. And when those men got circumcised and they were sore, Simeon and Levi killed them. Jacob got angry at them. Says, now because of what you've done, we've got to leave. And when it came down to the blessings of the children, Jacob pronounced certain blessings on Simeon and on Levi that were not good. YeHoVaH now separates Levi and says, you guys are going to do the work. You're going to work. You're going to clean up all the dung. You're going to mop up all the blood. You're going to keep the place clean. They had the lowliest job on the planet. Imagine thousands and thousands of bulls, rams, and goats. Imagine cutting those hides and throwing them in the pile, flaying the animals and taking the fat and throwing it over there. And this animal, seeing this animal get its throat cut, and of course, it can't contain itself. And so you got little pebbles of goat feces and sheep feces and cow dung all over the holy place. And then blood everywhere. I mean, just blood. You know, I've only seen one animal being slaughtered at a time. And much as I hate to admit it, you know, back where I came from, we ate pig. And, you know, we slaughtered the pig and the guts from the pig, and the hair had to be burned off, and because, you know, you ate everything on the pig, the head, the eyes, the tongue, the tail, the feet. At least back then we did. And so now you got goat hoofs and skulls. I mean, you got all kinds, innards, inward parts, all over there in a nice big old pile in the Temple Mount that the Levites now got to find a place to get rid of all this stuff. So everybody comes up and they party. You know, it's like you come to the party, you bring your wine and your food, and you sit and you camp out and talk about the scriptures. You bring your sacrifice, you bring it to the altar, and they cook it and hand it back to you, and you on to your family and enjoying yourself. And they got to clean up the mess. Not to mention, can you imagine how many porta potties? I need to help you get an image, because you got hundreds of thousands, millions of people conversion in Jerusalem. Like, you know, they just held themselves for the whole time they were there. Yeah, right. So you had Levites cleaning toilets, Levites cleaning guts and blood and all of these things, because they were doing the work. They weren't in the sanctuary praying, singing Kumbaya. They were working. Jehovah says, I have set them apart to do the work of the tabernacle. They are to take care of all the furnishings of the tent of meetings, fulfilling the oblations of the Israelites by doing the work of the tabernacle. Give the Levites to Aaron. Now, Father is saying, I mean, imagine, I'm going to take a tribe of people and I'm going to give them away. I'm going to give these people to Aaron and his sons. They are the Israelites who are to be given wholly to him. Appoint Aaron and his sons to serve as priests. Anyone else who approaches the sanctuary will be dead. These are my instructions. Jehovah said also to Moses, I have taken the Levites from among the Israelites in place of the first male offspring of every Israelite woman. Now here's the plan. Jehovah says, you know, I'm going to have this tabernacle, but before, when we were in Egypt, he says, I want you to put the blood on the doorpost, and this is going to preserve the firstborn. And what Jehovah was saying is that at this point, he himself now is redeeming the firstborn of Israel. So now the firstborn belongs to him. He redeemed them. They belong to him. And now he says, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to replace the firstborns. Mom, I'm going to let you keep your firstborn sons, but I'm going to take the whole tribe of Levi and I'm going to put them to work. But let's look at the process here. He says, the Levites are mine. For all the firstborn are mine. When I struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, I set apart for myself every firstborn in Israel, whether man or woman. They are to be mine. I am YeHoVaH. And YeHoVaH said to Moses in the desert of Sinai, going back to chapter 3, verse 14, count the Levites by their families and clans. Now you need to see this. I want you to count them. Count every male a month old or more. So Moses counted them as he was commanded by the word of YeHoVaH. The total number of Levites counted at YeHoVaH's command by Moses and Aaron according to their clans, including every male a month old or more. Every male a month old or more, 22,000. Now it's not, this is the males of Israel. Okay? In Levi's clan. YeHoVaH said to Moses, count all the firstborn Israelite. Now, what is happening here is YeHoVaH is about to make a swap. You see. Brother Vincent, do you mind if you could just come with me for just a moment?
From the beginning of time, from the beginning of the creation of man, YeHoVaH has been communicating with mankind. Adam and Eve, kings and pharaohs, even the common man has been given direction from the Almighty. But there are other voices, voices that can lead to curses, despair, and even death. How can you distinguish God's voice? How do you know what His voice sounds like? In his dynamic, life-changing teaching, How to Hear God's Voice, author and teacher Arthur Bailey shares important biblical truth that will help you identify and distinguish the voice of the Almighty from all other voices.
Yeshua says when the word of YeHoVaH has been sown in the heart, the enemy comes immediately. He comes to steal it. Because if he can take that word out of you before you get a chance to operate in it, you'll never see the expectation that you should have and the manifestation of why the Father spoke to you in the first place.
In this teaching DVD collection, you will learn why YeHoVaH communicates with His people, why He wants you to hear His voice, how to identify His voice from others, where He's most likely to speak to you, and so much more.
When you get in His Word, you are literally getting to know Him. A reading of the Bible is like a conversation with the Almighty if your heart is open for Him to speak to you through His Word.
Now, for your gift of $45 or more, Arthur would like to send you as his gift to you this 4-DVD collection, How to Hear God's Voice. Each DVD presents clear insight that will strengthen, edify, and encourage your faith in God. Call the number on your screen, visit our website, or write Arthur Bailey Ministries, P.O. Box 1182, Fort Mill, South Carolina, 29716. This teaching is a must for every true believer. Call or write today and have your relationship with the Almighty grow stronger and stronger.
I certainly appreciate it. Brother David, can I call it? Maybe, yeah, you all come and just stand with me if you would. Thank you. Now, let's say you are Levi. And of course, you represent the firstborn. You can come a little closer. I won't bite in. I got some cologne, so promise. You may want to be the firstborn. You might want to be. Before this is over, I don't blame you. I'd want to be the firstborn too. But anyway, we've got the Levite and we've got the firstborn. YeHoVaH says, now I want you to count all the Levites, every male that is a month old, I want you to count them. And that came out to how many? 22,000. He says, now I want you to, you got a number here. Now I want you to make a list of all of the names of the firstborn of Israel. Make a list, because we're going to do something here in just a moment. He says, now take the Levites for me in place of all the firstborn of the Israelites. So first of all, he says, these are going to be the ones who's going to do the work. But I'm going to release the firstborns. They're all mine. Everybody belongs to me, but I redeemed the firstborn. And I'm not going to just take the firstborn of the Levites. I'm going to take all the men, every last one of them. Every Levite is going to be mine. And if every male Levite is mine, then that means every female Levite is mine. And that means that every male that comes from the male and female Levite is mine. And so every Levite for perpetual is mine. For perpetuity. Anyway, they're all mine. Perpetuity. Thank you. Okay? So it says, okay, Levi, you're going to hang out with me. You can go home. It's not over yet. Now, he says, so Moses counted all the firstborns of the Levites as the Lord commanded him. The total number of firstborn males a month old or more was 22,273. So we've got 22,000, and now we've got 22,273. So you got to come back. Now notice he told him to make a list. So the 22,000 he sent home. So you all go. But take the Levites in place of all the firstborn of Israel and the livestock of the Levites in place of their livestock. Now notice the Levites had livestock. They had possessions. Everyone who came out of Israel, out of Egypt, remember, they spoiled the Egyptians. So the Levites had property. They didn't have land. Nobody had land. But they had animals just like every other tribe. They spoiled the Egyptians just like every other tribe. And so they're all on equal footing as possessions are counted. He says, now the Levites are going to be mine in place of the firstborn. So all of their livestock, everything they came out of Egypt with, I'm taking. I'm taking them, I'm taking their family, I'm taking all of their stuff, and you moms who I told you to give me the firstborn from your womb, I've got a plan for you. All you have to do is redeem them. They're mine. They're rightfully mine. But I'm going to give you the option to have them back. These, no option. These, option. To redeem the 273 firstborn Israelites who exceed the number of Levites. So he says, 22,000 of you firstborns, go home to your mama. 273 of you, stay with me. The 22,000 that I sent home is being replaced by the 22,000 Levites that I counted. But there's a problem. There's 273 more firstborns than there are Levites. So a man for a man, but we got 273 men left. You get the picture? So here's what we're going to do. For every head, now what I'm trying to show you is because there are those who think that because the Levites replaced the firstborns, that the firstborns are now off the hook. No, they're not. 22,000 of them are. Because Jehovah replaced man from man. So now, what he's saying is that for every 22,000 Levites who replaced the 22,000 firstborn, these 273 have to be redeemed. And you don't have a choice in the matter. You're going to pay to get your child back because I don't want them. So here's what you ought to do. Collect 5 shekels for each one. 273 of them. We're going to get 5 shekels for each one according to the sanctuary shekel, which weighs 20 gerahs. Now, it's important. The sanctuary shekel in Numbers chapter 3 has already been identified as a currency. The currency was introduced into the Levitical and to the sanctuary and to the tribes. It was introduced through the census. The census introduced the corns, and the money from the census went where? To Aaron, to the treasury. Now, we got some more money. We got money coming. 273 heads at 5 shekels each. But it doesn't stop there. Because now, what Jehovah is about to establish is a redemption process for every firstborn. Give the money for the redemption. So we got 273. We take the money. Okay. You bring the money, take your boy. Bring the money, take your boy. Bring the money, take your boy. So Moses collected the redemption money from those who exceeded the number redeemed by the Levites from the firstborn of the Israelites. He collected weighing 1,365 shekels according to the sanctuary shekels, and this is where you get the number. 22,273 minus 22,000 Levites is 273 Levi or firstborns times 5 shekels equals 1,365 shekels. And then Moses gave the redemption money to whom? Aaron. Go home to your mama. I got work. Oh, you're gonna be cleaning dung the rest of your life. Now, we don't know if this is, imagine, we glorified the Levites today. This is what many in Messianic Judaism, Cohen Gadol, glorified the Levites as if they are a righteous and holy person, when in fact their role was to be given as servants to the priests. The priesthood came from Aaron's lineage. From the line of Aaron is where the priesthood came. The Levites came from all of the other Levites other than from Aaron's lineage. Their job was to work. Their job was to serve. Their job was to make sure that the sanctuary was kept in order so that the priests could do their work. The priest wasn't cleaning this stuff up. They wasn't keeping the grounds clean and making sure the lawn is mowed and making sure the animals were fed and making sure the pens were cleaned up and making sure the blood was off the temple or the sanctuary grounds or the tabernacle grounds and making sure the hide and everything was buried properly and burned properly. That was their work. They were workers. Thank you. Moses gave the redemption money to Aaron and his sons as he was commanded by the word of YeHoVaH. And so we see YeHoVaH replace the firstborn with the Levites but he continued the redemption of the firstborn. Now, what YeHoVaH gave is he gave the tithe to the Levites to do the work. It was like, okay, I'm going to bring you into my service, but I'm going to pay you. You're going to get paid. Numbers 18:20. YeHoVaH said to Aaron, you will have no inheritance in their land, nor will you have any share among them. I'm your share and your inheritance among the Israelites. I give to the Levites. Who give it to the Levites? YeHoVaH. I give to the Levites all the tithes in Israel as their inheritance in return for the work they do while serving at the tent of meetings. Did they have any choice in the matter? It's not like you could just choose. It's the same way today. If he's not calling you, many are called, few are chosen. He's the one who's doing the choosing. Just as he chose the Levites, at first he said, I want the firstborns, and now I'm going to choose the Levites, and I'm going to put them to work, and you all, because the firstborns belongs to me, I'm going to give you the opportunity to redeem them. And this redemption was not saving them. It had nothing to do with whether they went to heaven or not. But see, Christians have a tendency to think anytime they hear redemption, Jesus redeemed us. Yes, he did. But he did not eliminate the redemption process. If he did, all dogs would go to heaven. No, they wouldn't. Because, all of the unclean animals had to be redeemed. What is animals being redeemed for got to do with heaven? You hear me? But a Christian, Jesus must have died so the animals could go to heaven too. Because if the redemption of Jesus paid the price, then now everything that had to be redeemed will go to heaven, even the land, because the land could be redeemed. That's what Jubilee is about. Folks, let me finish this. From now on, the Israelites must not go near the tent of meeting. Now he's saying, listen, now you need to see this because the tent of meeting wasn't a church service. I don't care how you call it, a tabernacle or a temple. It was not a church service. Folks didn't dress up on Sunday morning and go to the tabernacle or to the temple. They weren't allowed in the temple. No Israelite was allowed past the brazen altar. Not one. And you got the brazen altar where the sacrifices were made, and you got the courts, and then you got the inner court, and then you have the Holy of Holies, and no Israelite was allowed to come near the tent of meeting, or they will bear the consequences of their sin and will die, even after they've been redeemed. See, the whole idea of the redemption was to keep the plagues, the sicknesses, the boils, and all of the other things that you don't want to deal with from coming upon them. The census introduced money into the equation of that which is holy and given to the service of YeHoVaH. Now, the redeeming of the firstborn introduces another stream of income. And that's what it was. It was a stream of income to the service of YeHoVaH. YeHoVaH gave a tithe of all. Jacob swore a tithe of all. The Israelites give a tithe of all. And even the Levites had to pay tithes. of all to the priests. Numbers 18:23. But the Levites shall do the service of the tabernacle of the congregation, and they shall bear their iniquities. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations, that among the children of Israel they have no inheritance, but the tithes of the children of Israel, which they offer as a heave offering, unto whom? Unto YeHoVaH, the tithes of the children of Israel, which they offer as a gift, a heave offering unto YeHoVaH, I have given to the Levites to inherit. Therefore I've said unto them, among the children of Israel, they shall have no inheritance. And Jehovah spoke unto Moses, saying, thus speak unto the Levites, and say unto them, when you take of the children of Israel the tithes, which I have given you from them for your inheritance. Who gave it to the Levites? I mean, this is throughout the scripture. He says, when you receive the tithe, because the children of Israel had to offer the tithe, somebody had to receive it, but it belonged to YeHoVaH. Jehovah takes it and he says, now I'm going to take what the children of Israel give to me, and I'm going to give to you as your work. But you need to understand that the tithe, get this, then you shall offer up a heave offering of it for YeHoVaH, even a 10th part of the tithe. So I'm going to give you the 10th, but you got to take a 10th from the 10th I give you and give it. And this your heave offering shall be reckoned unto you as though it were the corn of the threshing floor and as the fullness of the winepress. And what is he saying? It's not that your heave offering is going to be corn and wine or grape. Basically, what makes the offering holy is because it belongs to me, Jehovah says. But when I give it to you, now you've got to take the 10th, which is holy, and get it out of your possession. And then the rest of it, you should treat as ordinary. Just like the corn in the threshing floor or the wine press. It is no longer holy once you remove the holy part away from it. But here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, you are holy. And so if you who are holy have in your possession that which the Father has placed in your hand, then that makes what you have holy because you are holy. Do you hear me? Because you are holy, everything within your possession should be holy. This is what the Almighty commanded. Be holy, for he is holy. So, if you're holy, then whatever you do with that which is in your possession, you need to understand that you're doing it in the presence of the Almighty. Now, how are you treating that which he's given you? See, when he gave it to the Levites, he says, now listen, don't think for a moment that because you're a Levite, you're not subject to the tithe, because you are. No different than the people who I commanded to tithe, to bring the tithe that I'm giving you, and now you must, what? Tithe. Thus you shall offer an heave offering unto YeHoVaH of all your tithes, which you receive of the children of Israel, and you shall give thereof of YeHoVaH's heave offering to Aaron the priest. So now he's providing for the priest. Now you got to understand, Aaron's household is a lot smaller than Levi's, because the whole tribe of Levi, remember, Aaron is a Levite. He was not Jewish. The high priest was not Jewish, he was a Levite. I know that may be strange to some of you all's hearing. And so now, Aaron, who is a Levite, but designated by YeHoVaH from among the Levites, and his family to be the priest, but he's a Levite too. Out of all your gifts you shall offer every heave offering of YeHoVaH, of all the best thereof. So now here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. YeHoVaH has commanded the children of Israel to bring the best. So the Levites have the best. And then he says, I want you to take the best of the best and give it to the priest. Give it to Aaron. Of all the best thereof, even the hallowed part thereof, out of it. YeHoVaH could choose, he would choose the place the tithe and offerings would be brought to. Deuteronomy 12:6. Now pay attention. And there you shall bring. Now here he's saying when you come into the place that I'm going to give you, I'm going to designate a place that you're going to bring your gifts. You shall bring your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes. Now wait a minute. Isn't the tithe the sacrifices and the offerings? Your heave offerings, your vows, your free will offerings, the firstlings from your herds and from your flock. Are y'all reading this with me? He repeats it in verse number 11. And there shall be a place which YeHoVaH your Elohim shall choose to cause his name to dwell there. There you will bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, your heave offerings of your hand, and all your choice vows which you vow unto YeHoVaH. When you have made an end of tithing all the tithes of your increase the 3rd year. So now we see another thing. We see a 3rd year tithe, which is the year of tithing. And has given it unto the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, that they may eat within the gates and be filled. So now he's saying, listen, see, this is the whole purpose of the storehouse. See, the storehouse was to keep the grains and all of the produce that didn't go bad. YeHoVaH would preserve it, because you got to understand something, ladies and gentlemen. When the people were commanded to allow the land to rest, that means in the 6th year they could not. In the 7th year was a rest year for the land. YeHoVaH says that I'm going to give you enough stuff for how many years? 3 years. I'm going to bless you with 3 years of harvest. What are they going to do with 3 years of harvest? Where are they going to keep it? So not only did they have the storehouse in the temple, but every person had to have some form of storehouse to preserve 3 years of harvest, because there was no harvest in the 7th year. They plant in the 8th year, and in the 9th year, they begin to harvest. 3 years without freezers. 3 years without refrigerators. 3 years without any form of ice. How are they going to store this? See, here's the thing. YeHoVaH, when he watches over your stuff, he preserves it. He says, you're going to think carnally, and I done told you, don't lean to your own understanding. You're asking yourself, well, if we don't plant, how are we going to eat? I've got this thing figured out, YeHoVaH says. Now, do you trust me? I got it all figured out. I'm going to bless you if you keep my instructions. If you do what I'm telling you to do. You're thinking about 1 year, and I got you covered for 3. You're trying to get your mind around not sowing for a year, and I'm telling you, I'm going to bless you so much, you won't need to sow. And not only am I going to bless you, but I'm going to preserve it. Now, let's go back to Exodus chapter 16. In Exodus chapter 16, Father gives the children of Israel some instructions concerning the Sabbath to test them to see if they would keep his commands. He used the idea of this manna. Remember the manna? He says, listen, 6 days you're going to have manna. If you let it set, what's going to happen? It's going to rot. There'll be worms. It's going to stink. Now, but on the day 6, I'm going to give you twice as much manna, which means it's not going to rot on day 7. Now, what stops it from rotting on day 7 that didn't preserve it from rotting on day 5? Because some people went out and they didn't eat it all, and it rotted, it stinked. And then some people went out on the 6th day. On the 7th day. Why would they go out on the 7th day looking for manna? You know why they went out on the 7th day looking for manna? Because they didn't get enough on the 6th day. They made no provisions. They didn't follow instructions 2 times. One, he says, I'm going to give you enough manna for 2 days, but a person probably had the mindset, okay, I got enough. This will last me for a day. This will last me for a day. And so now they got this mindset that I'm going to go out. Forget what Jehovah said, because they've already got it made up in their mind what they got to do. I got enough manna for day 1. Okay. Got enough for day 2. Okay. Got enough for day 3. Okay. Got enough for day 4. Pretty soon they're in the habit of going out looking for the manna, regardless of what Jehovah says. The 6th day is you to gather enough for 2 days. Instead of gathering, now they don't have any. So they're forced to go out and look for it, all because they neglected not only the instruction of the Almighty to gather enough for 2 days, but they go out looking on the 7th day. All because of not heeding the instructions of YeHoVaH. He says, listen, I know how to take care of you, but you don't trust me to take care of you, because you lean to your own understanding when I've already got you covered. You can't even see past a year, and I got you 3 years down the road. Folks, this is powerful stuff. So when you're made an end of tithing all the tithes of thine increase the 3rd year, which is the year of tithing, and has given it unto the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, that they may eat within your gates and be filled. Israel actually had 3 tithes. The general tithe paid to the Levites. This was the money that they were given, the children of Israel, which was holy. And then the Levites turned around and gave 1/10 of that to the priests. The 2nd tithe was the tithe associated with the sacred meal involving offerer and Levite. This was the tithe where they would save now to go up to Jerusalem. And then there's the 3rd year tithe, which concerned the poor, the widow, the stranger, the fatherless. And of course, there's the Levites who's up serving in the temple. See, the Levites that were in the land during the feast had to do what? They had to go up and serve. Now, David established an order, and he established these cycles where some Levites would come up because the Levites were scattered throughout the land. But all of them had to go up to Jerusalem during the time of the feasts and the festivals, and they were dependent on the people. And now you've got the storehouse that is there, because if the people are bringing like they're supposed to bring, like Malachi says, bring all the tithe into the storehouse, that there be meat, and this is not animal flesh. The meat was the grain, all of the things. Some of you who've lived in the country, you know, you've been in agricultural areas, you see these big grain bins. These were the kinds of things, if you can think about Joseph and the 7 years, get the idea of these big bins that they would store all of this grain for this period, and then they would ration it out over a period of time. It's like the storehouse. The temple had a storehouse, but not only did the temple have storehouses, the villages and the towns and the cities had storehouses, and the people had storehouses. But there was the storehouse in the temple. The giving of tithes was established long before Levi was born, or before Moses the Levite was given the commandments in written form. Although the Levites were not given an inheritance of land like the other tribes, they were given towns in the tribal lands, and they did own property. They had houses and possessions in the towns they lived. Where do you think the Levites lived in? A hole in the ground? A cave? See, when he says, I didn't give them an inheritance, what he's saying is that I didn't give them tribal land, but I gave them towns and villages within the tribal lands. So there was no land of Levi, as there was a land of Judah and the land of Simeon and the land of, Issachar and, Dan, and all of them had tribal land. Levites did not have tribal lands, but they had towns and villages within the tribal lands. And those tribal lands belonged to the Levites. So if they built a house in that tribal land, that was their house. Their children grow up in the house. They leave that house as an inheritance to their children and to the children's children. Let's look at it. The Levites always have the right to redeem their houses. So do houses go to heaven? See, this whole Christian mentality of redemption, Jesus redeemed us. Yes, he did. But that didn't eliminate the redemption of firstborns, the redemption of property and land and houses. The Levites always have the right to redeem their houses in the Levitical towns which they possess. So the property of the Levites is redeemable. That is, a house sold in any town they hold, and is to be returned in the Jubilee, because the houses in the towns of the Levites are their property among the Israelites. But the pasture land belonging to their towns must not be sold. It is their permanent possession. So for those of you who think that the Levites couldn't own property, then, we got a problem here. If a Levite moves from one town, from one of your towns anywhere in Israel where he is living, and comes in all earnestness to the place Jehovah will choose, he may minister in the name of Jehovah, his God, like all his fellow Levites who serve there in the presence of YeHoVaH. He is to share equally in their benefits, even though he has received money from the sale of family possessions. Not only did they own it, they could sell it. Okay. Next week, we're going to get into, hopefully, the New Testament. Now, I've held you long enough. Father in heaven, I thank you for your people. I pray that you will help us to not be hard-hearted, stiff-necked, rebellious people, but that we will surrender to the process that you have chosen under the leadership and guidance that you've ordained. And I pray that you will raise up apostles and prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers who understand the call and who is ready to lay down their life for the cause. I pray your blessings on all those who are under the sound of my voice. I ask that you continue to strengthen them and give them the courage to endure, for we know that only those who endure till the end will be saved. And I pray for strength and courage upon your people. Father, you know the needs of your people. You know the cry, the call. You even know the secret things in the heart that people don't even want to say, those unmentionables. But I'm so thankful that you search our heart. You know those things within us. And then you send your word, which is a discerner of the heart and the intent. Father, I pray that you will cause us to lay our heart bare before you, that you might be able to clean us, give us a new heart, renew the right spirit within us, so that we might run the race, fight the fight, and finish the course. And I bless you and bless your people in Yeshua's name. And I want to pronounce the blessing upon you. YeVaReka ka YeHoVaH va'ish mareka. YeHoVaH panavileka v'yikuneka. Yisa YeHoVaH panavileka v'yasem leka shalom. Jehovah bless you and keep you. Jehovah cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. Jehovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen. Shalom, saints. Tithing and giving first fruit offerings are critical parts of the believer's faith and has its foundation back in Genesis 4:4, when Abel brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And Jehovah had respect unto Abel and to his offering. Abel was commended by YeHoVaH in Hebrews 11:4, where it states that by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh. Solomon said in Proverbs 3:9-10, honor Jehovah with thy substance and with the first fruits of all thine increase. So shall your barns be filled with plenty, and your presses shall burst out with new wine. The prophet Malachi wrote in chapter 3, verse 11 and 12, to bring ye all the tithe into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, says Jehovah of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there should not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, says Jehovah of hosts. And all nations shall call you blessed, for you shall be a delightsome land, saith Jehovah of hosts. When we tithe and give offerings consistently in obedience to Jehovah's commandments, we can count on him to keep his promises to us and consistently meet all of our needs. It is our Father's desire to bless you. However, it begins with you and your act of obedience to tithe and give offerings. Do it today. Shalom.
For more information, visit www.arthurbaileyministries.com or call 888-899-1479. House of Israel International Services is made possible through financial contributions from brothers and sisters like you. Thank you.